Hello and welcome to the Tarkus Zone. Thank you for joining me. Today we're going to be talking about the roadmap for the game Frozen Flame. And there's been some questions posed in the when I look in the forums or the discussions on Steam or even on their Discord channel is what's going on with this game? You know, is there a roadmap? Well, there is a roadmap. Some people seem it easier to pose a question on those two platforms without actually doing any research to the game. They just hope they can just ask their question and then somebody will answer it. But I see it posed all the time that what's going on with this game? What's the roadmap? What's the future of this game? And it's like, that's why I want to kind of put this video together, and hopefully that when people ask this question in the future, I can point them to this video. And it's not for me to get YouTube likes, or I'm just trying to help those people that pose the question, and then there's like 9 or 10 people responding with answers, and it's like, well, geez, if you just look at the roadmap, which is this picture in front of me, which I brought up on my screen, I'm going to go over it. And again, they have this on their Discord pinned. I think that's where I got it. Is I went to their general discussion in Discord and went to the pinned, and this is the first thing that was there. So let's look at it. I'm also going to discuss the status of the server that I'm hosting and the status of the player count that I have on my current server. But let's first look at the roadmap here. And the early December update, they did that update which added cosmetics to the game. You had to go out and get gingerbread tokens, I'm going to call them, and bring them back to Krampus, and he would give you some festive decorations that you could buy. Originally, it was you brought the cookies or the gingerbread to Krampus, and he would then trade you those for one of the items, decorations that he had. Well, the developers changed that mechanic so that you actually get a recipe from him. So basically you trade in the cookies and he gave you the recipe, and then you can make that item as many times as you wanted to make it. And so that was a good add-on to that mechanic, because it did seem quite grindy and at the time they didn't really have the gingerbread falling as plentiful as it does now. So, and if you had 10 people on the server, they were all kind of racing against each other to get them, and so you felt like you were competing with the people that you were playing with in the, you know, so basically if you were a player base of 5 people together playing the game together, and it would be like, well, I'm going to go get cookies, guys, don't go out and get them at this time. And that's what happened, was people would have to, they didn't want to compete with the people that they were playing with to go get the cookies, because there was only 2 occurrences of the cookies at any time in the world. And so it was a crazy mechanic, but they did fix that. When they came out with the update 2, which also happened in December, they did an update 2, or between the 2 updates, they made it so that the cookies were more plentiful, and then when you did get the packaging, you got more cookies. So it didn't feel as grindy, and it didn't feel like you were having to compete against the other people on the server. I mean, I guess that's a good thing if you're playing a PvP server, and that's what it's all about, is competing with other people. But the way they got their game now, it doesn't sit right as a PvP game currently. I mean, yes, you can turn PvP on, but the biggest gripe I have with every single person that I've talked to is, what's the point of turning PvP on and working to build a base where somebody can wipe out your base by a game mechanic that they haven't fixed yet? So that has been I'm not going to get into detail about that mechanic, but there's a mechanic in the game that people have been complaining about since they open shop and turn the game on, that there's a mechanic in the game that allows me to walk up to my enemy's base and wipe out that entire base within seconds without having to do any combat at all to the base. And that kind of took the PvP people, they were like, no, I'm not going to play a game that allows any troll to show up, even if the server rule was don't don't do that or you'll get banned. But the other problem is I've played with the console, the command console, and I tried banning a person who was trolling our server with the mechanic I'm talking about, and I couldn't ban them. The system kept on saying I can't recognize that person's name, but yet I'd go to the console and say, give me a list of the names that are on the server right now, and that person would be listed, and I'd be like, okay, ban that. I would use the command prompt to ban that person, and didn't stop it. So I had to take my server down for 15, 20 minutes, bring up a backup, and at that time my server was PvE, full building protection, and you couldn't do damage to each other. Even with full building protection on, meaning that you can attack the building and it won't take damage, this person was able to use the mechanic to wipe out the people's buildings. And so it just soured so many people to wanting to play the game currently as a PvP model. Because, and this is, and I agree with this, with these people that are telling me this, that look, when you've got a mechanic like that hasn't been addressed and hasn't been fixed, I'm not showing up to PvP people. Because the other thing is, if you, like say you take the building aspect out of it and you call it just a PvP battle royale kind of thing. The other thing that PvPers were telling me is it just was too clunky as a PvP game. So if you took everything out of it and you took two players and stuck them next to each other and just told them the PvP, within 10 minutes you'd be all petered out with PvP, because the mechanics were a little clunky and there were just not enough abilities. It was like rock, paper, scissors. I think that's exactly what I would compare it to, is how long do you want to play rock, paper, scissors until you get bored with it? And so that's what happened with the PvP base. And so the reason why I'm going over the roadmap is with hopes, as we look at the roadmap here, that part of the game will get better. I think what it is it's a good thing, it's a bad thing. With Ashes of Creation, for them to kind of figure out their combat mechanisms, they opened a battle royale portion of the game. Now their core game's not coming out. Who knows when that's coming out? But they opened a battle royale, which was smart of them to do. So it allowed them to balance, okay, and make sure the game was running well for people wanting to play with all the mechanics that the game has to offer. Now, with this game, I'm assuming that's why they started the campaign first, was so that they could flush out what was going on with their systems, hear from people before they got to stage 2, so that at least when they got to stage 2 in their development, they would be at a point in the game where they have flushed everything out and they've heard from everyone that made sense. I mean, I hear some feedback from some people that are just way out in left field. And I think to myself, well, hopefully the devs aren't listening to that person. I'm hoping that the devs are listening to the people that have actually played PvP survival games, or even just building PvE mechanic games, like Worm is one, for example. Worm Online, for example. So let's look at this going forward. So the update 2 in December, that happened. They dropped Dragon Grove. Now, when they drop a new content in this game, my server gets a huge population increase. My server can hold up to 24 people. At one point, I had 18 people running around my server, and that was within 24 hours. And it was doing great, but within a couple days, the population of online people dropped. So because I run a Discord server at the same time I'm running the game server, people join the Discord, and it allows me to reach out to those people, say, hey, I haven't seen you in a couple days. And I just want to talk briefly about my conversations with these people I reached out to. Like one individual I reached out to, I said, you played for a couple days, you started building a house, are you coming back? And they're like, well, unfortunately we're not, because this person was playing with his wife and another friend. And so there was 3 of them. And they're like, we're not coming back. We just don't think the game is there yet. And then I was like, well, can you explain that to me? And they're like, well, the combat feels a little clunky, and the monsters are uninspiring, and it just seemed like it, and it didn't feel like a survival game to them, because really rest mechanic isn't there yet. You know, there's no hunger or thirst mechanic. It didn't scream survival to them, and that's what they were looking for. And I said, okay, well, I understand that's what you're looking for. Well, hopefully in stage 2 you'll come back, and they're like, no, we're not coming back in stage 2. We're not PvP players. We bought the game thinking that we could play a PvE survival game with my wife and my friend, and that's what we were looking for. And it just did not feel like they had everything flushed out yet. And I said, okay, well, maybe by stage 2 they'll have a PvE survival component. Like when they put up their public servers, they'll have a public server that's a PvE environment server with all the survival mechanics that the PvP servers have. So maybe I can entice them to come back. Then there was a couple other people that had played for a couple days, and I haven't seen them on. So I reached out, and they're like, Tarkus, I finished the content. And I was like, what? And I was like, oh yeah, that's right. So I had remembered them posting pictures of them finishing the content. So what they did is, and when the Dragon Grove content got released, we had done a restart on the server, meaning that we wiped it. So when update 2 hit, we started with a cleaned, wiped server. Everybody started the same way. And I had at least 5 people that finished the entire content of the entire game in 3 days. And that was why they weren't coming back. They're like, oh, waiting for the next update. So they were able to blow through the entire content of the game in 3 days. And that was the majority of the people that I reached out to were like, you know, they didn't have enough content. And one person even said to me, they're like, yeah, the devs kept on saying they're going to blow us away with all the added content in update 2. There's going to be a massive, huge update. And they're like, scratching their heads. They're like, I went through the entire game in 3 days. How is that a huge update? And, you know, I got to say, you know, and these guys weren't playing 24/7, because I was on my server, and I would sit in a chair as I did other things in my studio, and see that these guys were only playing maybe a few hours every once in a while, and they still within 3 days blew through the entire content. Now, granted, they were working together as a team. They had all the gear. They had everything they need, backpacks to, you know, whatever they needed, they had it done in 3 days. So what the reality is right now, the server that I'm up, all the new people that just bought the game, I've been inviting them to come play. And those people who haven't played the game yet seem to be going slower, because they don't know the game fully. Like with these other people that blew through the new content after the update, they had already played the previous version, the previous version of update 2. So they knew what they needed to do to get through Titan. And then from Titan, that was all new stuff to them. The Dragon Grove stuff was all new stuff to them. But again, they blew through that real quick. And so really, I got some hardcore players on my server now that are just base builders, and just kind of like to la-di-da around, like, you know, I call them Care Bear players. And that's what the server is now. My server that I'm running now is a PvE full protection Care Bear server. And I did that because of the mechanic that I mentioned before that kind of hurts the PvP elements of the game. So in January, update 3, they're going to add a new boss to Dragon Grove, and they're going to add new weapons and combat potions, and new Dragon Grove islands. You know, that sounds great. At least it's an update, but it doesn't seem like it's a huge content drop. So I think what's going to happen is those guys are going to come back, and they're going to blow through that content within a couple days, which maybe that's, you know, again, maybe the developers have just put this campaign together so that they can figure out their game before they get to stage 2. Maybe this is not their bread and butter I call the bread and butter of the game. This is not what their game, just like Ashes of Creation, their Battle Royale is not their game. It's a portion of their game and their game mechanics so that they can flush out what their actual game is going to be. So that's just some thoughts that I have in my head. So they're going to be adding that January. The new weapons should be nice to see if they add quite a bit. You know, if they add 3 weapons, then it's not that big of content. But if they add up 8, 9, 10 different weapons with unique abilities, then I think that will also help with the PvP elements of the game, because then it doesn't feel like rock, paper, scissors anymore. it feels like a flushed out PvP game where you can actually strategize around the PvP content. Okay, then February, which is a couple months from now, the new island, Cursed Islands, new enemy type, Cursed Enemies. I think, when a lot of people had been asking, where are these cursed enemies? Because you get items in the game that give you negatives to the curse value, but you can't really find that many enemies that actually used curse against you. But it seems like here in this update, this future update, it's going to be a lot of cursed magic against you, so you don't want to be sporting those items that give you -14 to curse. New buildings and decorations. I don't know what the new buildings part about it. Maybe they're adding more assets in the. It'll allow you to build your house. Because if you're familiar with this game, you've got you hit Q, and then you can go into the building interface. I'm hoping that they add a few things to help with the building. I do a lot of building in the game, so I know the building mechanics up and down like the back of my hand. And it'd be nice if we see some new items in that menu, new quests, enchanting mechanics, new workstation and items. Obviously, if you're adding enchanting to the game, they're probably going to utilize other workstations and items you find in the world to enhance your items, and musical instruments. I'm not really sure if the musical instruments are going to make a difference, or if you could actually be a bard in the game where you pull out your musical instrument is actually the weapon. You got a sword in your hand, and then you pull the musical instrument in your hand as a weapon, and then you play it, and then it does something like buff the party or buffs yourself, or I don't know. I mean, it could be all sorts of things. You could make the monsters sleep for 3 seconds. Who knows? The Pied Piper, kind of mechanics where you can control mobs with it. I don't know. I mean, I'm just thinking. Or it's just musical instruments where I sit at my house with 3 or 4 people on the porch and we just play musical instruments for 15 minutes until we get bored. I mean, that could be it too. I don't know. I mean, who knows? So, stage 2. I think this is what most people are waiting for. And I know those people that could care less about everything up till now. I mean, I know people like that. They're like, I could care less about that campaign. I can care less about what they do in that campaign, but they better get stage 2 right. And it's like, yeah, I mean, I'm hoping that they do stage 2 right. And it's called the New Game Mode Survival, PvP, official public servers up to 50 players, new weapons, mounts, trading posts, and new player abilities. So I don't know, I got some concerns here with the last one there, new player abilities. I don't think you want to introduce new player abilities when you're opening up PvP for the first time, because you would think up to that point, up to stage 2, you've done as much balancing as you can, and then you're going to dump a new PvP environment and throw in a bunch of new abilities. That just sounds like that's going to be a pain in the ass for the developers, because you're going to know everybody, every crybaby in the world is going to be on their forums complaining about the unbalanced mechanics around the new abilities, because they released them at the same time as the PvP and didn't flush them out. You know it. I've seen it in so many games where they introduce something and it's just not balanced, or you got one guy who's figured out a workaround or a cheat, or they find a unique bug that makes them invincible. I know in Black Desert Online, I had done that when I had helped test that. There was a mechanic that allowed me to do 2 maneuvers in one, but it made me invincible. I couldn't take any damage. So when I was PvPing people, I was just killing 50, 60 people at a time, and I was never taking any damage. I would just rape people, and people would report me as using a bug, and they reached out, and I was like, no, I'm not using a bug. I've already reported it to you. Look at this. And they're like, oh yeah, you did report that to us. So, could you show us how that is? And exactly what I showed them was I had taken advantage of their frame rate protection. So when you did abilities, it was called a frame rate. It was like a second in the frame rate where you can't take any damage. Because I was stacking the frame rates, I couldn't take any damage. And I was just godlike. And they're like, wow, that's a huge problem. I'm like, yeah, that's a pretty huge problem. You know what? They fixed that within 12 hours of me having the conversation with them. They're like, yeah, we got to fix that. So they fixed it. But we were in like beta mode. So it wasn't the flushed out game yet. Imagine if I had gone into the flushed out game and started doing that nonsense. I mean, even monsters and bosses or anything, I just needed to run that series of abilities, and I was invincible. I couldn't die. And so I'm glad they were able to flush that out. So I'm hoping that when they do update 2, that those new player abilities are flushed out, or at least maybe put it in the February update so that we can test them before you get into the PvP mode. Because, I mean, there are people that are soured on this game already because they can't stand the campaign. They find it clunky. They find it uninspiring. It's not the game that they want to play. They want to play the PvP. And if you're going to get those guys to come back who have already invested in your game, you don't want it to not be a balanced, or as close to balance as possible, and mechanics flushed out by then. So that's just my thought about the survival. But I'm hoping for the survival to be what I hope it's going to be, is a full-fledged team effort, protection of guild assets, working together as a team, warding off people trying to take your stuff. That can be really fun, and it can be, I would compare it to like the Battlefield games, or any shoot 'em up game like Paladins, or the games like Rainbow Six. I mean, yeah, this is not a first-person shooter game, but this game could be like that, where you've got teams of people fighting together on a battlefield, and I know in other PvP games that I've played that the server itself is only up for 30 days. So, and then what they do is they do a ranking system. And they did that in Rend, where you join the server and the server is active, and they're like, the server ends in 28 days. So whatever happens on that server, the players got ranked for what they did. And at the 28th day mark, they did the server would end, and they would give a leaderboard information, and then they would start the server again. And that made it great, because this way everybody's starting new again, and it was a battle back and forth waiting for the server to end. And then 28 days later, you would find out who was on top, what went on, and it was fun. Now, these might be servers that are just always on, meaning that when they turn them on, it is what it is. I mean, there's no leaderboard, it's just what it is. It's just an open survival game that you just keep on going back and forth on. And, that can be good too. Either way they do it, I think it'll be a good time. Stage 3, Ghostwoods. And again, this comes down to their campaign. If you go back prior to Stage 2, this is just more content to their campaign. And in my opinion, and this might be Tarkus just not understanding the player base, but I don't know why anybody would continue playing the campaign after that once PvP rolls around, unless you're playing this game as a Care Bear. Or, I'm not trying to be derogatory about Care Bears. I'm a Care Bear. I like games where you can just Farmville or build something and just be left alone. I get that, but I think that player base is not as big as the player base that wants to play the PvP. So I'm hoping that in this development, that adding new content to the campaign, that the PvP elements don't get lost. That's what I'm just hoping. I just know that once I get to the PvP survival, I don't think I'll ever look back at the campaign, unless the campaign is a requirement to get stuff in the PvP environment. I mean, they could have an overlap where if you do something in if the server itself has the ability to integrate some of the campaign elements that you've already accomplished into the PvP realm, maybe that would entice me to go back to playing the campaign, but I probably won't. So stage 3 to me is, stage 3 is going to be adding weapons and armor. So that will affect the PvP elements if they're integrating it into that. So that will. But as for the NPCs and quests and the main campaign, Chapter 3, that's all That's not what I'm looking to do. If I want to play a fleshed out campaign game, I'll go play Skyrim or something like that. You know what I mean? It's like something really fleshed out and really amazing graphics. That's, you know, and I know Bethesda's got a game coming out. I think it's Starfield. Or I know they're coming out with a standalone person. You know, one player, it's not multiplayer, but it's basically it's going to be a big next thing. So if people want to play a campaign, then those are the type of games that I go to play a campaign for. You know, that's just Tarkus. I mean, there's people out there that play a game for all sorts of reasons. I had a guy that played World of Warcraft just to fish. Just to fish. So I would say, look, we're raiding tonight. Why don't you come help us? No, I'm fishing. It's like, well, where you are. And he'd go all over the World of Warcraft maps fishing. And that's all he ever did in the game was fish. And that was his cup of tea, and that's what he did. And God bless him. I mean, if that's the kind of player you want to be, if the campaign's your thing, if that's your stick, then stick with it. If PvP is not your thing, then it's not your thing. I get that. But for me, I'm looking for the PvP chaos that this game can bring. Stage 4, new biome, frozen land. Again, in addition to the campaign, new boss, the ice dragon, new weapons and armor. Okay, if that goes over to the PvP side, that's going to be very nice as a PvP element. New location, and the final boss, faceless. So I don't know. Maybe when they say final boss here in stage 4, that's what they're saying is at that point we're done with the campaign and we're going to focus on the PvP side of this game. Maybe that's what this roadmap is saying to me is we're doing the campaign so that helps us flesh out our game. We're doing the campaign for the people who want to do the campaign to help us flesh out the game. And then moving past stage 4, it's going to focus on the PvP elements of this game. Now, I'm going to go back to stage 2. 50 players seems a little small to me. I'm hoping that this gets bumped up to 100 players. That would be nice. The more players, the better. I think 50 players is a little on the light side for me, unless, again, they're only having the server up for a certain window of time. So if the server's only up, for the example that I used before, then 50 players is okay because it feels like a battle royale kind of first-person shooter battle royale kind of thing, where it's going to be fresh every time the server does a wipe. But if you're going to have the server up indefinitely, 50 player at a time just seems not enough people on the server. I know at least 10 people that I know that are going to come back for PvP that's going to play with me. That's 11 people. So we just ate up 11 slots right there for my team alone. So, you know, that's just my thinking on it. It'd be nice if it was bumped to 100. But that's it in a nutshell. Everything I've said here is based on my opinion of playing the game. I'm not trying to say terrible things about the campaign. It is what it is. It's just that this is not why I bought the game. The campaign is just for me to do stuff until stage 2 comes out. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you for joining me. This has been the Tarkus Zone.